What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 whenever you sign up, and you'll be supporting the channel whenever you do that. Additionally, you can become a patron. Not only is that the best way to support the channel, but additionally, you'll get to vote weekly on a deck tech that I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsom, you rock. Now, let's get into today's deck tech, and I thought it'd be a good idea since Thunder Junctions has been out for a little bit. Let's go over the cards that are actually worth buying if you have a place to put them in your deck. We're going to go over some budget cards first, maybe some cards I missed in spoiler season, and then we're going to go through the more expensive cards but are probably worth their price that I think will probably just go up in value later on. So if you really need a spot for it in your deck, you might want to pick it up. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to cover is something I missed in spoilers is Archmage is new. This card's extremely budget and honestly pretty solid. The fact that it gives our instant and sorcery spells flashback, or at least one of them, whenever it deals combat damage, means we can get value out of it even if we don't have anything to saddle it. And then if we are able to saddle it, we can just basically cheat the cost of that instant and sorcery spell. Now the downside of this card is how are we going to get it through, right? It's a 2/2, very chumpable, and then you kind of want it down later in the game when you have some of those big instant and sorcery spells in your graveyard. That way we can cheat the CMC. So you kind of probably want to put this in a deck where you can easily make creatures unblockable, or you're buffing your creatures up, and then again you want a decent mix of instant and sorcery spells. Just a cool card I thought I'd shout out because honestly you could probably put this in a deck and it can put in some work. Insatiable Avarice is probably the best worst tutor we've gotten in a long time. What do I mean by that? We have a lot of budget tutors, but not all of them are exactly there, and this one's at least flexible and does have some card advantage tacked onto it. So if we spend 5 mana, we're going to tutor a card from the top and then draw 3. 3 mana draws us 3 cards, and 2 mana tutors a card to the top. Now sorcery speed kind of sucks here, but again, like I said, this is probably the best worst tutor that you can get on a budget right now. Smuggler's Surprise has honestly been surprising me. This card does everything I need it to do in my Stompy Green decks, or your Stompy Gruul decks, right? Now, I do want to shout out a card, Heroic Intervention, here, because that's a way more expensive card and does something very similar to this. Now, I know Heroic Intervention is a little more expensive because it just protects all of your permanents, and this is limited to your creatures, but it protects the very important creatures that you need to protect, you know, your big ones. And then additionally, it does have that flexible ability to just put 2 creatures into play. So this card's going to be very flexible in your big Stompy Green decks, and you're probably going to see it included in more decks on the channel. The Key to the Vault. Now, I'm surprised I didn't talk about this card more at release. It's kind of right up my alley. I like to play some big creatures. So in your big Stompy decks that also have blue in them, if you put this in there, you're going to dig super deep and you're going to get to cast a spell for free. This can be incredibly powerful. I immediately thought of, Teamer List. They're going to want this. If you have a Rafine deck, Rafine decks love this because Rafine gets massive, and then Rafine is kind of a reanimator strategy now anyway, so instead of reanimating something, you dig deep and cast it for free. This is going to see a lot of play in your niche decks that have very big creatures at the helm, and I think it's going to put in a lot of work once people start playing with it. Now, Memory Vessel. This one's going to be good in those artifact strategies that can create a token copy of this. You do exile it, so you only kind of get one use out of it, but I think it could be pretty good in artifact storm lists where you're trying to reduce the cost of your artifacts and cast a lot of artifacts all at once, and maybe even create token copies of your artifacts. That way you can keep refilling your hand over and over again. Another deck that's really going to want this is your aggro mono red decks. Those decks just have a tendency to play their entire hand and then run out of ammunition. So now you can just refill your entire hand. Very useful, and it does kind of ruin our opponent's plan for a turn. You could draw them into better things, but 9 times out of 10, this is really going to mess with their game. Nexus of Becoming is going to be amazing in our colorless decks, right? 9 times out of 10, those are 90% ramp, so 6 CMC is not going to be a problem for it, and then all of those decks are kind of lacking card advantage. Not to mention, we can use the cheat into play ability on something like a Portal to New Phyrexia and just get insane value that way. So this is going to be good, and again, those colorless strategies that need a little bit more card advantage and are 90% ramp anyway. Archangel of Tice is pretty good here. It's a prison effect, but a prison effect on a creature. 3 white pips, kind of rough, but you're probably playing this in an Azorius prison deck anyway. And then it does have that flexible ability to be an opposite effect, right? It's going to make it hard for our opponents to block instead of making it hard for them to attack. Pretty decent here. Altec Matter Weaver. Now, there's been a little bit of a sub-theme happening in the artifact category, right? I'm talking about our Urza decks. Now, there's a whole bunch of decks that just try to make as many constructs as possible, and this is going to be amazing in those strategies. Those strategies tend to be a little more creature-heavy instead of control and just a bunch of artifacts, so we can trigger Altec Matter Weaver a lot. Not to mention, there is treasure tokens just thrown in there, so we can create treasure tokens whenever we cast a creature. This can kind of help us storm off and get a ton of value. So whether we're creating constructs or we're creating those treasure token copies, this guy's going to be amazing. I can't see us often using the ability to create a 1/1 gnome, but if we don't have a better target, at least that is an option. So this card always does something. Outcast Trailblazer. Now, you know I love power matter strategies. The difference between 4 power and 3 power is kind of a ton, so this is going to see less play than your elemental bond effects, but in the decks that want it, it's going to be one of the best cards. Plot is kind of being a lot more powerful than I initially thought. I mean, whenever you read it, you're like, okay, that's pretty strong, but then you're playing it and it's really strong. This ramps you a little bit, so you kind of plot it away. Next turn you cast it, it nets you a mana, and you cast something with 4 power, and then you draw a card. It feels extremely good during play, and honestly, a little better than I thought it would. Pillage the Bog. Now, this is a very good card. Again, plot, a lot better than I thought, and it just digs you deep and gets you to your key pieces. Late game, it's amazing. It can find that board wipe you're looking for. Early game, pretty good. It can find that land you're looking for. It's just a very flexible card that I think is going to see a decent amount of play. Step Between Words. Now, this is going to see more play in your decks that just want to storm off or have a tendency to just dump their hand onto the battlefield. Plot for 6 is kind of rough, but the issue with wheels in Commander, half the time you wheel it away, and if it's not one of those 3 CMC wheels like your Windfall effects, that's your whole turn, because those wheels cost up to 6 mana anyway, right? So you wheel, everybody gets a fresh hand, and then you're the last person to cast spells from that fresh hand. So the fact that this has plot is just better for you, because you can plot it, and then on the next turn, cast it for free, and you will be the first one to cast spells from your fresh new grip. So again, it kind of breaks the rules of why expensive wheel effects are not that great in Commander, and in a casual setting, this is going to be perfect for, again, those decks that just have a tendency to cast everything out of their hand super fast. Moving on, let's talk about Esoteric Duplicator, and this is going to be very good in a very specific strategy that I like playing. It's going to be our Izzet artifact strategies, or even Temur, right? As long as we have Izzet colors, this is going to be good for us, because what we normally want to do is get a Goblin Engineer on the battlefield, and we can search up our Sword of Hearth and Home. From there, we're going to generate an insane value engine that involves Brass's Tunnel Grinder, Everflowing Well, and now we can add Esoteric Duplicator. And you basically just go ahead and sacrifice the Everflowing Well, you get your Brass's Tunnel Grinder, and then you do that every single turn, and you're just alternating card advantage and mill for your Brass's Tunnel Grinder effects, and that's going to eventually draw you into the cards that win you the game. And now we can just double that with the Esoteric Duplicator, so now whenever we sacrifice our Brass's Tunnel Grinder, we create a copy of it and draw even more cards. This, again, gets you to your win con pretty fast. I just love generating this value engine, and this is just going to add to it. If you notice, they're all 3 CMC, so Goblin Engineer can find every single one of them. Now, let's get into the more expensive cards that I think are worth their price. The first thing we're going to talk about is Railway Brawler. This card has overperformed for me a ton. This is a 4 mana Zupendril that synergizes with 1/1 counters. That's just not okay. Because, like, with a Zupendril, you can't further the power, right? But if you're playing a 1/1 counter strategy and you're already playing stuff that doubles your 1/1 counters, now you're getting a creature that enters, it doubles its power, and then doubles the 1/1 counters. It can kind of get really insane really fast. And then again, this is all for 4 mana as long as we plot it. So we can actually cast Railway Brawler and then instantly cast another creature, and that creature is going to enter with double power. This really creates an unstoppable board state really fast, and it's kind of really hard for our opponents to deal with. And then they just tack Trample and Reach on this guy for no reason, and like I said, he's just been overperforming. Sword of Wealth and Power, I don't think I have to tell you guys, this is just a very powerful card because they gave a creature protection from instant and sorceries. Now, this is going to stop all the single target removal, but notably, protection from instant and sorceries will get us past the damage dealing effects of red, right? So your Blasphemous Axe, we're going to be safe from those as well. And then we get to generate treasure tokens and double up on our instant and sorcery spells. Yes, this card's just going to be very good in the right deck. Perfect protection piece, and additionally doubling up on our instant and sorcery spells. Kind of amazing in the deck that wants this. It's going to be one of the best cards. Terror of the Peaks got... Terror of the Peaks got a reprint, guys. This was a $40 card, and now it's down to $16. We all know this is a very powerful card in those Power Matter strategies that just cast a ton of big creatures. So if you guys have been waiting for the price to drop, the price has dropped, and it will probably steadily go back up as long as it doesn't see a reprint, right? The Gitrog, the Ravenous Ride. Now, this is one of those cards that I think is honestly underrated right now. I know that's weird to say, but people are only thinking about this in a commander, mindset. But in any deck that just generates a lot of creatures, this is honestly insane card advantage. If you guys have a Jund deck, like maybe a what's the big dragon? It starts with Z. I can't think of the name right now. I'll put it right here. But if you guys have any of those decks that just generate massive creatures, whether it be Jund, whether you're in maybe a Mudratha deck that cares about big power creatures, the Gitrog monster is just going to draw you a ton of cards. And it has haste and trample. So this happens the turn you cast it. It gives you instant value, which is something I think people are overlooking. Yes, you have to saddle it, but it's saddle 1. So even if you're sacrificing a creature that's 3 power, you're drawing 3 cards and you're getting to put up to 3 lands into play. The ramp, the card advantage is insane. The fact that this is $3.50, kind of crazy for a mythic. So if you guys think that you have a deck that you could jam this in, I would recommend trying to pick that up. 3 steps ahead, this one was pretty cheap, but it steadily started to go up just because of the flexibility, right? We get to counter target spell, which is notable because 9 times out of 10, or not 9 times out of 10, but recently they've been printing more counter spells that don't interact with creatures, right? And 9 times out of 10 in casual, someone's casting a creature that's a problem, especially with these new creatures like Railway Brawler. If you guys let that resolve and it sticks on the battlefield for a couple turns, that guy's going to win the game, and it's not going to be very surprising that he won the game either. So 3 steps ahead, the fact that it can counter creatures, very flexible. The token part, not as interested in, but it could come up. I'm mostly playing it for that the draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards effect, right? Because now we get card advantage on a counter spell, which is kind of nutty. And then we have our Voltborn Tyrant. Do I think this is worth the price? Probably not. Is it going to be super fun? Probably. So yes, that's going to do it for the video. I want you guys to leave down in the comments below any of the cards that I missed, cards that generate insane value, and just cards that are worth the price. That way, this community can go ahead and get the good ones, right? With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors. I would like to shout out my high contributing patrons, Newsome, Prater, Chicken Salad, and Excessum. You guys are amazing. I will see you in the next one.